Even our conversations offline, the beauty of your mind shows up, but you're a liar. You're laughing, I'm not.
My parents, phenomenal parents, but they were not affectionate. I can count on this hand the number of times my mother and father together said, "Brian, I love you."
Brian Keith Hodges looks well put together, very articulate, thinks well on his feet. How has your mess impacted your legacy?
Incredible question. Let me give you an analogy.
Are you having legacy conversations yet on purpose?
It is essential. This has to be a part of everything we do. We absolutely have to have this conversation. It can't be optional.
You're a divorced man, right?
I am.
How have you had to work to redeem your legacy because of divorce?
And here's my true testimony. It's an axiom that I keep with me. Everything I didn't get, I either become or I'm bitter by. He comes up, my son Brian Jr. is with me. "Young man, I bet you want to be a preacher like your daddy." He said, "Oh no, ma'am, not at all. I've worked hard to set a good model for you and a good example." He said, "Dad, it's nothing to do with that." He said, "Dad, this is the part. I want to be me, and I need you to be okay."
You have one of the most fascinating and adept minds that I know.
Wow.
Being able to sit with you on occasion and listen to you talk. I've heard some of your stories. I don't know if you remember, you were telling me the story about going across seas. I think you were in Germany and you were preaching, and one of the professors or something says, I want him to preach. Mm-hmm. And he dubs you the professor. Being an understudy of yours as I'm pursuing my doctorate, even our conversations offline, the beauty of your mind shows up, but you're a liar. You're laughing, I'm not. This camera, please. This camera, please. He will lie and not think. You know, he'll make you think it's his memory, but that's a lie. He's a liar.
Oh, that is so funny.
You want me to tell you what he like? No, I won't. None of your
Please,
business.
and thank you.
Little inside joke. Man, your voice has to be in this whole legacy conversations.
Thank you.
I want to give some framework. I think that would be important. First time me and Dad had ever stood in the same pulpit was in June, Father's Day of 2021. Wow. In my entire life of ministry. First time we were in the same pulpit, I asked him to come to the church right in the middle of COVID. And it was kind of like the public starting of what was a private continuation of our relationship, of our healing. I've never talked about expressly what happened to me and Dad and what that was like. Maybe one day I will do that. But it was the public continuation of what had happened in private and had been happening in private for a number of years. So I record a legacy conversation and didn't call it legacy conversation. It was just called Legacy. Mm. Did that top of this year. 2025 February. Took the word legacy from the graphic that I had when Dad came.
Wow.
And this is what's turned to Legacy Conversations.
How nice.
Dad was really, really honest about that. And I know you saw a father's heart, a son's heart, and two hearts that have turned back to each other and continuing to turn, which to me has been beautiful. And I started thinking, the Lord started tickling my heart. This needs to be a conversation bigger than just Jasper Williams Jr. and Jasper Williams III, that there can be some portable practical principles. And so I'd like to have a conversation that is more fluid than anything else. You are a biblicist. I'd like for you to be able to reach in whatever pot, wherever your mind goes. All right, now I'm put you on the spot. Why did I say you're all of those things? And how does your resume prove it? You remember the part about being a doctor and being so adept how does your resume prove what I said?
My life, my journey started with just a passion for serving the church and loving the church. And over time, I realized what had scaffolded was my commitment to God and God's church. And that led me to Beulah Heights University, AABA, ITC, master's, Columbia, doctorate, postdoctoral studies, and to just remain present, to be stuck right in the concentric center of the academy and the institution of the church, and to be there faithfully, thoughtfully, creatively, so that whatever is happening in one is bringing meaning to the other. And so when you used all of those terms, I was wondering who you were talking about, but now that you pointed at me, I realize so much is the truth. But that's really where it is to be there, because the institutions, they left each other, they split, they fractured. But it takes people who are willing to come back and say, you know what? These institutions shouldn't just be buttressed together. They should be dovetailed together. They should be locked. And the carpentry metaphor is so apropos because it brings us back to what I believe was the original intent, to create scholarship so that in our spirituality, we can create a sense of valuation and appreciation.
Beautiful. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, because I know sometimes we can feel uncomfortable, at least I can, when people start asking us to talk about ourselves.
No.
But I want people to understand who I'm talking to, Dr. Brian Keith Hodges. And you referenced it in past, being creative and all those other kinds of things. When did you know you thought differently? Well, let me ask you, do you realize that you're different in your thinking and your approach than other pastors, preachers, ministry leaders?
Well, I think it's a coin, and it has two sides. To some degrees, yes, and to some degrees, no. To some degrees, yes, because I work at it. To some degree, no, because I realize I am a part of this incredible cadre of leaders who have this amazing diversity, this brilliance, this scholarship, this commitment. But on the other hand, I'm always asking the question, how can we push it further? What else can we do? It empowers our thinking. It empowers our research. It empowers our study. It empowers our prayer life. It empowers what we do, why we do, how we do, and then it allows us to come back and to be grateful to be a part of this kind of connection with others. And so it doesn't make you feel bigger, better. Different is a good word, but at the same time, it makes me feel normal.
How do you define legacy?
God gives each of us a specific purpose. That purpose is going to be shrouded in 3 or 4 things: the acquisition of information, taking that information and applying that information to what you do every day until you graduate, until you move into maturation. Maturation is doing it with a skill. And then the last stage is saturation, doing it without thinking. So real saturation leads us to leaving a legacy, something that we're so passionate about, something that we know our hands must be on, our lives must be in, and how we deliver it to another generation of people who will carry it out, not for our sake, but for the sake of humanity, the sake of the kingdom, the sake of our relationship.
How are you doing that?
Interestingly enough, I'm giving myself to people. I'm giving myself to relationships. I'm giving myself to connections that will foster improvement, that will leave impact, that will have an imprint, that will improve somebody's life to the degree they say, I want to take this on and I want to pass it to someone else. I am the product of James Franklin Chalk, who's my childhood pastor. He learned how to read when his daughter went to kindergarten. his son-in-law, Bertram Sims, J. Allen Caldwell, who licensed me to preach, Eddie Jones, who ordained me, G.T. Lewis, who gave me my first position, and the line goes on and on. Each one of them deposited something in me and gave me the kind of support I needed to put something in somebody else's hand. It is my joy to have these incredible relationships because it simply helps me to continue the legacy of what was already started.
Speak practically. So what I mean when I say that, you say you give yourself to people and you mention some other things. I hear that as being the principled side. I agree with everything that you just said.
Sure.
Totally. But how could someone else hear your story, take what you define legacy as, and this might not be a good word, not measure, but apply? Oh, okay, so that's what it means to give yourself. Mm-hmm. I've been giving myself. I've not been giving myself enough. I never thought about that as being a way to give myself. Mm-hmm. Howard Hendricks was my taught hermeneutics my first semester there, and he, with that Boston accent, he says you got to put the cookies on the lower shelf.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think it starts with intentionality. It starts with a sense of intentional gratitude. I'm so thankful that someone poured into me. I'm so grateful that they saw something in me. And in many cases, when I didn't see that in myself, and that they continued to pour into me and then gave me a platform and an opportunity and then allowed me a unique space to articulate who I was from the deepest level, and then gave me one charge, and that was go be your best. In that statement, I heard, don't just go be your best, but go be your best and then give your best to someone else. So it's intentionality, it's focus, it's courage, it's not discriminatory. It's taking the time to answer a phone, return a text, look at a direct message and say, absolutely, I'll talk to you. Absolutely, I'll call you back. You, Bishop Hodges, you actually called me? Yep, because you asked me to. Really, what does that mean? It means that I care enough that I want to put some part of my life in your hands, some of my intellect, some of my wisdom, some sense of my spirituality, and drop it in your life so that you in turn will do the same to others.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me a real-time conversation that you're having where you're doing exactly that, maybe in story form?
Sure. So I made a commitment. I started preaching at 19. I went to my first pastorate in McDonough, Georgia at the age of 22. My greatest concern was that I may not be enough. I tease some of my colleagues that everybody in my first church was on one of the M's, Medicaid, Medicare, or medication. And so I'm like, what do I do? What am I to do? And the first thought that dropped in my head was do what you've been trained to do, serve. And so I made a commitment that nobody else that I would know would be in that same position. And so now I'm seeing young men and young women who are coming saying, I'm going to my first pastorate, just got ordained. What do I need to do? And it's to put my life on display right in front of them, to talk through my narrative, to provide them insights, some anecdotal, to give them wisdom, something that will help ground them so that they won't be capricious or impetuous or passive, but they will be engaged, present in the moment with those people that they're called to lead. And it gets greater every day. It leverages all of the things that I know and the things that I don't know. The use of technology, operating in a different space, playing in a wider space, having unique experiences with people, and being able to unpack them and to parse them out in a way that is fulfilling and helpful and supportive while it helps them remain unique to their values and their calling. And once you have connected with people on that level, they begin to value the intimacy that begins to grow because you care enough to see to it. And so I'll show up for them. I'll preach for them. I'll teach for them. I'll coach them. I'll mentor them. I'll be there with them. Some of them I've had to hold them in my arms when they say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, no, we're going to do it. We'll do it together. And to commit to be there, because I understand what it's like when you show up on your first day. You're the youngest. In my context, I've pastored 2 churches in my life, Antioch Baptist Church in McDonough, Georgia, and Gathering of Champions. In both cases, I was the youngest pastor they had ever had. At my first church, Antioch, they had never had a pastor under 40. At my current church, they've not had one under 40.
And you were 21 at Antioch.
22.
22. And how were you?
25.
Okay. All right.
And so I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, what am I to do in this space? And over time, I gathered information. I grew, maturation. I committed myself to it, saturation. And that's what I've been doing with young men and young women, and even some older ones who are getting called later in life, just to partner and to be present enough to negotiate and navigate life with them.
So I think that me and Bo talk about sunning. Actually, he was the one I heard the word from. He starts talking about how he doesn't like that, how pastors, bishops, preachers, whatever you want to call it, try to sun people. Mm-hmm. Or I think son sounds better than daughtering people. But we get the concept. How do you keep that from happening? Because I think there can be it can be dirty in ways. Mm-hmm. When I think of the word spiritual father, I know I am a spiritual father, because mothers create atmosphere and environment. Oh, baby, here's some cookies and this, then. But fathering sees a treasure and works to unpack it. Mm-hmm. And I know that I'm a spiritual father. If you're going to be around me, I am going to see something that God put in you. Sure. And whether you let me or not, I will at least comment towards it. Mm-hmm. I'm learning to do that differently with my kids. You can see in their eyes will, here he goes again. Right. They'll realize it later, right. The benefit of it. But it can feel a little manipulative, a little dirty, for you to be my spiritual father. It's me giving every year. And I think it should be. Mm-hmm. I think there should be the rewarding, the act of appreciation. Mm-hmm. But how do you think legacy in that context, maybe sunning people versus what you do? Mm-hmm. Because I'm clearly seeing, so Jesus left his legacy in the disciples, and we see where we are now. I'm hearing that what you're doing is creating or filling a need for now, but also potential for later, with knowing you and expectation for it to continue. Mm-hmm. So talk about, let's say, the sunning side, and then the other side. Yeah.
First, I don't have an ego to play to. It doesn't matter to me if I have 1,000 sons. Yeah, absolutely. If I have 1,000 sons or not, I'll tell you a funny, true story. This will resonate deeply with you. So I get a phone call from a guy that I don't know, and he says, hey, Hodges, can you come preach for me these 3 nights? It's a week or 2 away. I said, sure. He says, well, let me be honest. You weren't my first choice. I said, okay. He said, you weren't my second choice. No problem. He said, you weren't even my third choice. I said, no big deal. He says, the third guy and the second guy were both double booked. They recommended each other. Didn't work. The third guy recommended you. He said, call Hodges. He said, so I wanted to say that to you. I hope I didn't offend you. I said, one, I don't have an ego to play to. He said, what's the other thing? I said, is the check gonna cash? He said, yes. I said, sounds good. I'm your guy. And he laughed like you did. And I just told him, I said, bro, I'm sorry. I don't have an ego to play to. I'm not offended. That doesn't mean anything to me at all whatsoever. While I appreciate— I
just want to tell you.
Yes.
I don't think I would preach that revival.
Yeah, I know.
What?
I know.
You have the audacity to even tell me. Preach it yourself.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, it's so funny. And so I don't have an ego to play to. I don't need you to call me dad or spiritual father or bow to me or in any way provide this sense of reverence or deference. I'm here because God's been good and he's been faithful. And my only response is to, in turn, do the same. So if I had to think of 3 words, here's what I would say about making sure that we have relationships that are genuine. I would think of authentic, sincere. I would think of organic. That if our relationship is to grow into anything, it would grow organically. That we're never in a space or place where we're pushing it, trying to make it happen, that it grows organically, that who you are at the core and who I am at the core meets together, that we are sincere with our intentions, with our actions, with our desires, with our hopes, with our callings, with our commissions, our challenges. Those are the things that are important. If anything else becomes more important, then the relationship becomes manipulative.
Yep.
It becomes cold and fruitless. So I want to make sure that it grows organically. If I am to be a spiritual father, it will grow organically. It won't grow at the behest of me. Now, I'm your spiritual father and you got to give. Those things don't matter. What matters is relationships, people, what God has called them to do, and their strategy to accomplish it. That's what's important to me. If it grows organically, fine. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You and I have had 100 conversations, seems like, right? A number of doctoral students. We've not, but there's something about us being together, laughing, always having conversations, always talking on the same level with what we're thinking or what we're processing in ministry. That happened organically. It wasn't that we knew the same people or text. No, it was simply an organic connection. That organic connection. Literally, you invited me to preach for you. After never hearing me preach, you had never heard me preach. There was an organic connection. Well, I think one time we were with Dwayne Harden one time in Decatur, and we were preaching together. But that was the only time. Yep. That was the only time. And organic connection. One of the biggest days for your congregation, you invited me. That's what I mean by organic, authentic, and sincere. That ensures that the only thing that's happening is happening at the very request of God, and we're seeing it manifest in a way that is mutually beneficial and God glorifying.
Well, I will say that the first time you preached, immediately there were other times thereafter. You are an incredible preacher.
Thank you, friend.
So much so until that's where my family and I chose to spend this past New Year's Eve because we wanted to.
I remember.
Yeah, we wanted to receive from your ministry, and thank you for that. All right, so how do you lay atop scripture? Well, let me ask another question. Are you having conversations, or as much as you know about that, I've shared with you about legacy conversations. Mm-hmm. Are you having legacy conversations yet on purpose? Maybe not calling it legacy, but however you want to call it. Are you having those kind of conversations?
Absolutely. It is essential. If we were just to think about the kingdom, the continuation of the kingdom, and you said it a moment ago, the continuation of the kingdom is incredibly important. And the only way the kingdom continues is that there's being this intentional pouring into, couldn't have said it better. When you said, we're here today because of what Jesus did with his disciples and what the disciples did with the next group, the bishops that they made, the church fathers, and what the church fathers did, and so on throughout the annals of history. And so everything you just said is what I am contending is the normal practice of everyone who's been in any leadership role. That leadership role, they had influence, they had impact. They're always looking for, or should be, looking for ways in which they can impact and affect the next generations so that they might see positive change, progressive change, and sustained change. So I think it's a really important piece. And I don't think we should be having many conversations if this isn't a part of it. Mm-hmm. That's
a major statement.
This has to be a part of everything we do. We absolutely have to have this conversation. It can't be optional. It can't be a suggestion. It's got to be mandatory, because we're creating gaps that nothing will fill, not knowledge, not wisdom, not AI, nothing will fill these gaps. These gaps are gaps that are only filled by intentional, connected relationship.
How do we get it right? Because, I don't know, did I reference it here? You know, me and Dad have had to work on our relationship. It's 20 years have I been away from Salem, if you round up to January. When I look back, I can see some victories and I see some defeats. I see some pain. I see some joy. Having just preached for him recently, I mean, it's one of those father-son moments I don't think that we'll soon forget.
So nice.
But I think that part of it was wrong. It was done wrong. Not in my case. People don't understand why I left. And it's so simple. I left because God told me to leave. But then when you take it and put it in another context of a spiritual father, mother, spiritual son, daughter, on the spiritual side, as well as the natural side, you can see that sometimes it is the too big for your britches. It is the rebellion even. It is the lack of legitimizing. It is the, all those other kinds of things. What do we do about that? The wrong way that legacy is being established, which I think you can establish a legacy that's tainted. But how do we use our heart for God, our tools, our minds to do it right, to help clean up the mess? What are your thoughts?
I think it begins with us working at it. Most of us don't work at it.
But how do you work with it? Work at it when one of the two parties don't want to work. Like, son, I need to come and see you. I'm talking about a spiritual father, daughter. I remember one time there was this young lady that was serving in some part of our ministry, and I spoken to her spiritual father, and it was his, I'm trying real close, it was his suggestion that she come. He thought she would be a great job doing this. And one day she tells me, I have to leave. But what's going on? My spiritual father says he needs to come and look at me. It kind of made me that this person does have an ego to play to. But that's what I'm talking about. This whole manipulation piece, it's not about disrespecting, but it's that kind of power that's being exhorted. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I want to double back because you're bringing up a really good point that I hope will segue into it. When we start talking about these whole legacy conversations, connections, creating the pipeline for it starts with us working at it. And first, it starts with us working on ourselves. We have to live in reflection, contemplation, and assessment before we could ever decide how we feel about it. In order for me to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, I'd have to rewind my mind 35 years. I need to look at what I got, what I didn't get. And here's my true testimony. It's an axiom that I keep with me. Everything I didn't get, I either become or I'm bitter by. So I've learned how to be what I didn't get. For example, my parents, phenomenal parents, but they were not affectionate. I can count on this hand the number of times my mother and father together said, Brian, I love you. I saw them every day. They took very good care of us. We were never without food, clothing, and shelter. Wonderful, wonderful life. My parents were not affectionate. Not just that, my grandparents on either side, maternal, paternal, they were not. My aunts and uncles, they were not affectionate people. I'd see them walk into the house with each other. You know how others hug. They'd be like, hey, how y'all doing? Okay, good. We'd sit down and eat and they talk. Right. I'm different. I'm a hugger. My daughter asked me why. And I said I needed to give what I didn't get or I'd be bitter because I didn't get it. So I became it. I embodied it. And I think that's the story about this reflection, contemplation, assessment. It's going back saying, what didn't I get? What didn't I have? What would have made me a different
it
person?
Just hit me.
A better person today than I've ever been. And that's intentional action. That's the hard work. The hard work is to look at the gaps and the spaces and say, I acknowledge that's a gap in a space in my life. I don't have to be this way. I can be different. I can create something different. And that's when we start seeing it. Now we're ready to look at other people in light of the gaps. The gaps help shape our lens. And now I look at you with empathy and with compassion. Interesting word about compassion. Latin etymological derivation. Come together, patty, suffer. Until you've gone through those other stages, you can't even have compassion because you'll never be able to suffer with anybody because you're too busy trying to get them to serve you or to sow into you. That's the struggle that happens when you're not looking in the rear view, when you're not making assessments, when you're not reflecting, when you're not in contemplation. So it's with intentionality, it's with purposefulness, it's with a sense of criticality that you have to do it. Because if not, you become the abuser instead of the father or mother.
What I just heard you say is that sometimes the son or daughter have to function in the role of the father or mother.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I say that is because not to stay there, but I'm talking about to do the work. And I think that can be very humbling to have to do on either side. But I don't know how to get a younger generation, daughter, son, daughter, to move on that. Especially when there's no conviction. I don't know how to get the older generation. I've watched guys that I know ready to bring their gifts to bear for, I'm going to just dilute the water, spiritual father, natural father, make it neutral. And the elder has too much pride to receive the gift, knowing that the younger has what it's going to take to not keep it from falling, but to stabilize it all and to relaunch, reinvent the future. How do we stop that?
Yes, a powerful question. And of course, I have 1,000 stories. I'm so glad you started with, and he has 1,000 stories.
Please. I mean, and the reason why I say that is Jesus taught in parables, but I think that it's the stories that people remember, the axioms that people remember. And I also think it's the stories that helps us. The stories can make it more pedagogical for the change. Please.
Absolutely. Let me begin by saying kneecap to kneecap, just what we're doing. We have gotten past being present with each other enough to even begin to cast new ideas. Let me share something with you that I've come into the knowledge of. That's a good conversation starter, isn't it? I've come into the knowledge of this. This is something that I didn't think or believe or feel years ago, but I do now. Let me share it with you. Most of us have not created the kind of environments that allow our friends to see us as co-laborers and partners and collaborators in what's going to happen in our now and our next. And because we've not, it's harder for people to get to us. But if we start by having kneecap to kneecap conversation. So, of course, I am 21 and I'm saying, maybe it's time for me to get ordained. And of course, my pastor at the time was Eddie Jones, and he just didn't believe if you didn't have an assignment, you get ordained. So
was Eddie Jones a name? Like, did he carry weight?
Oh yeah.
People knew him?
First Corinth, Atlanta. Oh yes.
Oh.
Eddie Jones, First Corinth, Atlanta.
Okay, all right, I'm with you.
Yeah. So he was like, okay, Hodge, well, if a church calls you. So literally, Antioch calls me on a Saturday. I call him Saturday night. When I tell him I'm the new pastor of Antioch Baptist Church in McDonough, Georgia, he laughs. So very proud of you. He says, show up Monday, we'll ordain you. So I got called to a church on Saturday. I preached on Sunday. They ordained me on Monday. That's the story. So for me, I chose not to follow that route. So once you preach your initial sermon and we have time where we stay together in the lab, working through sermons, working through preaching, working through ministry, working through the function, 2 years later, I ordained you. And I started doing that because I wanted to increase the consciousness toward clergy preparedness. Because you may not be a pastor, but you'll be a chaplain. Mm-hmm. And how many spiritual sons and daughters do I have in chaplaincy now that are not preachers? A young lady preaches her first sermon in our church, and her daughter comes up to her while she's standing next to me. I'm so very proud of her. She said, "Mom, I'd like to ask you something." She said, "What's that, baby?" She said, "I want to know why you didn't sweat, why you don't spit, and why you don't holler." She said, "Where'd you get that from?" She said, "Well, he does it every Sunday." So we kind of chuckled about it, but it was good to have her in her own individual skin and to be able to say to her, "You don't have to be a pastor. You can be a chaplain." Yeah. You know, you can work through that until we are willing to have kneecap to kneecap conversations and to elevate the thinking of our colleagues. Yeah. We will never see this change. So I think it starts by having these intentional conversations. I don't know who will see this video. Sure. I don't know who will see it, but there'll be somebody who'll see it and say, "You know what? I'm not going to be like I've been. I'm going to listen. Yeah. Hey, y'all, let's watch this video. This Hodges guy, this Williams guy, let's watch this video. Let's start talking about those conversations that are necessary for us to pour back into another generation or into another group so that we solidify something that's going to be lasting."
How do you lay atop what we've talked about so far, what is in Scripture, how do you marry them? Mm-hmm. But the Bible, you would agree with me that Scripture is full of legacy.
Absolutely.
You see it in so many different ways. I mean, even with the Trinity. Mm-hmm. How do we overlay the concept of legacy found in Scripture to the conversation?
Yeah, I think we have to do it with a sense of high appraisal of Scripture and scriptural norms, the practices. We see it in the priesthood. We see it in the monarchy. We see it in the prophetic ministry. We see the intentional legacy. I mean, look at Elijah. Elijah sees Elisha in a field and throws a mantle on him. And that begins a prophetic ministry that has upended what we have known about prophetic ministry, right? We see that over and over again in Scripture because it's essential that those who are going to be in the driver's seat in the next season must be tapped and touched by someone who has the authority of God, but also has the wisdom of man so that they might ensure that what God has started doesn't fall, but it continues. And that's with intentionality. That's with a sense of purposefulness. That's with a sense of drive. So every time I look at good theology, the first thing I want to see is good theology lived in our relationships.
Love it.
Don't tell me it's good theology and I can't see it in human form. Here's what the Bible says. It says, "How can you say you love God who you have not seen, and you hate your brother that you see every day?" In other words, your love for God must translate. That vertical love must translate into horizontal connectedness and relationships, and that love should be fleshed out. In the same way that God loves us, we are to love others. In that same way, we pass it to others, and we pass it to them because we've experienced it. We've accepted the call, the challenge, the commission, and now we live it in significant ways before people. They see the paradigm. They don't just hear about it. They see it.
One of the things I said is that legacy is messy, but legacy is to be guarded. Mm-hmm. I don't want to take the Scripture out of context. But it says, "We will not hide them from our descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done." Mm-hmm. And that was the stones, the 12 stones when they are crossing over into You know, and this isn't I think when you read Psalm 78, you're not reading the Inquirer or something salacious. You know, we're hearing from the heart of God as instruction that's coming from Asaph in this passage. But Asaph has to have seen some things that moved him to write this. Now, maybe he addresses in other places. I don't know. I haven't looked for that in that particular lens. But the messy part of legacy, I would look at my relationship with Dad that it has been messy. Man, let me just tell you, it feels so good to be open and to talk about my own story because of some of the things that you've said that's required. And it feels good to have a father that is willing to have a conversation in public.
Yeah.
My real heart is that people will see two Jaspers have be honest about the traversing to say, okay, this is what happened. If they did it, maybe we can too. So I bring that up to say there's some beautiful things that we could say about Dad and he about me. But then there was this truth. And I think that that's where Asaph writes from. It's beautiful, but there's some mess that's involved. Brian Keith Hodges looks well put together, very articulate, thinks well on his feet. How has your mess impacted your legacy?
Incredible question. Let me give you an analogy. We're sitting at a table. My favorite aunt that I buried a few years ago has put together this incredible Thanksgiving dinner, and it is the best that I've ever had in my life. Not before, none after. The best. We're eating, we're having fun, we're laughing, we're talking, we're enjoying. It's the most wonderful occasion. And then I walked in the kitchen, and the kitchen is a complete mess. Dishes piled up, pans, pots, spills, splatters. And you look, and if you hadn't been in the other room and you've only been in the kitchen, all you see is the mess. You don't see what that mess produced. You had to be in the kitchen. You had to go by it first to see what we were able to produce. Here's the wonderful thing. After we finished eating, never seen this before or since, all of us went in the kitchen. In one corner or the next, we started working to get that kitchen back to pre-Thanksgiving dinner prep. We got it back there. What it took an appreciation for the final product.
Yes.
But then you had to work backwards. Let's go back and get it clean. And in every relationship,
so good, man.
Every relationship, there's going to be that piece. What's behind the scenes? What's the messy part that produces the great part? And let us not live under any assumption. Every one of us got it. I don't care how together it is. Well, you can call Andy and Charles. You can call 1,000 other names. They all had a messy kitchen, but they produced something that was delightful. So we have to work through that messy piece and know that the messy piece is just as essential as the final product. It has to get messy. You got to break some shells. You got to tear some wrappers. You got to do those things that will help you embrace what it means to produce something that is good. In my own context, it's not running from those challenges, those issues, those struggles, those pains, those fears, those disappointments. It's running too. I'm finished preaching in a little city. I'm doing revival, and a lady comes up. My son, Brian Jr. is with me. The lady says, young man, I bet you want to be a preacher like your daddy. He said, oh, no, ma'am, not at all. So afterwards, we're eating dinner. And I said, son, what's wrong with me? He said, oh, nothing, Dad. You're good. I said, well, you don't have to be a preacher, but I want to know who's your icon. This joker said, Lil Wayne. I called the waitress. I said, Packy is up. He's like, I ain't done that. I said, oh, yes, you are. Oh, you done. I was like, you
pay your own
right,
bill.
You can't even eat this till tomorrow.
It wasn't even a kingdom name.
Right.
That's a lot to say about that.
Like, son, right? And later on, he and I kind of joked about it. He said, Dad, you were mad. I said, son, I wasn't mad. I didn't know what to think of it. I said, I was kind of being a little reactionary. I didn't know what to think of it. I said, because I've worked hard to set a good model for you and a good example. He said, Dad, it's nothing to do with that. He said, Dad, this is the part. I want to be me. And I need you to be okay.
Oh, my goodness.
With me being me, Dad. I know, bro. I was like, okay, as I cried. I was like, okay, I guess. You want to be you? Yeah, be you. That's why I named you Brian Keith Hodges Jr., to be you. I wanted you to be a mini me. And then it dawned on me, I had already unconsciously begun to superimpose what I wanted on Brian Jr. So I've had to learn how to deal with the messy piece. And Brian Jr. has lived his individual life, and some parts of it didn't make me happy. But I've learned to deal with the messy piece and believe that in the days to come, we're going to see that Thanksgiving dinner, man. All of us are going to be well because of the messy piece.
Bishop Paul Morton sat right there. His children, his 3 children, they were virtual on the screen. And Bishop started talking about his kids. It was a, if you haven't seen the episode, go watch it. But, PJ, his son, his namesake, began to pursue music, didn't want to be a part of ministry. And Bishop said, clearly there was this going back and forth between them. Mm-hmm. And Bishop's biggest thing was that it be clean and that it be wholesome. PJ says, Dad, I write about love. Bishop said he couldn't say anything else. Mm-hmm. He said, until it was that one song that you did with Lil Wayne. You and Bishop have more in common than you think.
Right.
And then PJ said, Dad, I didn't have anything to do with that. I didn't know what Wayne was going to do. Right. I did what I agreed to doing. But yeah, I was a product of divorce. Me and my brother, my parents divorced when I was like 12, 13 years old. Dad I'm struggling with how to say this, but Dad was on the rise. He was on this meteoric rise. Mm-hmm. And, he was becoming that household name, and he's preaching everywhere. Took great care of my mother. And Dad's hard work provided and afforded me and Joe all of what came with our lives then. The divorce really didn't blemish his name. I think his preaching compensated for it. Mm-hmm. And I think that people can want your gift more than they care about your heart. Mm-hmm. You're a divorced man, right?
I am.
I would imagine that your legacy is messy.
Sure.
I imagine that you would include the messiness of divorce into this part of the conversation appropriately. How have you had to work to redeem your legacy because of divorce?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked me. So let me start by saying that it was a contained mess. It was a neat mess, if you will. So there was not this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. My children could say the guy in the pulpit and the guy at home is the same guy. As a matter of fact, when me and their mother shared with them that we were getting divorced, the both of them said, really? And because they knew I was a practical joker, my son was like, yeah, right, Dad. We know you're clowning us. We know you're getting ready to tell us it's a joke. They couldn't believe it because we did not argue and we didn't fuss and we didn't move out and sleep in other spaces, etc. But we wanted to be honorable because we wanted to protect not just our family, but we wanted to protect what we had created. So we had to do it in that way. So a couple of things that I had to do is I had to ensure that I committed myself to remaining present. I would not leave my children. I would keep my family together as much as I can, and that it would resemble normalcy to the most part. You won't believe this, Doc, but I did devotion with my children every single day. Even the years that I was preaching out on the West Coast, I'd get up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and we'd read a psalm, a proverb, a gospel, an epistle, and we'd sing and worship. And I did it every single day because I wanted to protect their normalcy. I saw them every morning and every afternoon because I wanted to protect their normalcy. I did not talk about it publicly. I did not share it in our church. I never in any way, shape, size, or form disparaged their mother, our relationship. As a matter of fact, my whole conversation to our congregation, at the time I'd been pastoring there, probably 13 years, our whole conversation took 5 minutes. I shared with them and I asked them to allow me and my family to maintain our privacy. I never once talked about her, threw shade at her, etc. As a matter of fact, if I did have a conversation about her, it was about how she was an exceptional co-provider and a phenomenal mother, and how if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have been able to do all that I was able to do during when my star was on the rise. So it was intentional. Yes, it was messy, but we looked at the mess and we said, we're going to contain this and do something with this that will help maintain a healthy balance. I just didn't want my kids to look at me as a preacher and blame other preachers because of what they saw in me. So it was hard work. It was head work. It was hard work. It was honorable work that I had to do in order to maintain that and to do so with intentionality.
So no posting on social media is what we talk about, what we're saying. Keep your, I really believe, and I knew the answer to that. I really believe that is another hue or color of pain, and it's certainly an immature way to fight, because now I can bring people into my mess, and I just think that is a measure of immaturity. But I also see it in sons and daughters, in the spiritual natural. I have to keep saying that.
Sure.
And I'll come back to that. But what would you say to the guy who feels like he's destroyed his legacy or has lost his legacy or that his legacy cannot be redeemed?
I'd say read Ezekiel 37.
Tell him what it says.
And go back and see how this separated, disjointed, disconnected, scorched group of bones became a mighty army. I'd say go back and look at that. That was my first sermon, interestingly enough, Ezekiel 37. I call the sermon, Nothing is Beyond Repair. And I still, at my very core, believe nothing is beyond repair. I'd say you have to go back and you have to start looking at where you can begin. Where do you need to plug in? What do you need to forgive? What do you need to reconcile? What do you need to forget? Where do you need to be more present? Where do you need to embody humility? Where do you need to go and say, you know what? I'm paying for this. I'm paying for this session. We're doing this together. Where do you need to go and do that? Because if we're going to be someone that'll repair a legacy, you have to be invested in repairing it. Anything that you refuse to be invested in, you'll never fix. You gotta be invested in it. If you wanna fix it, you gotta be invested. If you wanted a conversation with your dad and he didn't want it, it wouldn't be repaired. If he wanted it and you didn't want it, it wouldn't be repaired. The thing that makes sense is that you both wanted it, one way or the other. You may not have been able to articulate it as such, but you wanted it. And that's the real truth. If he wants to repair this legacy, the real question is, how bad do you want it? That's the question. If you want it bad enough, you'll pull out all the stops. You'll do whatever it takes to ensure that it's going to happen. And you'll have this elastic tolerance and this elastic endurance. And you'll keep going back until you can begin to see images of change, of this growth toward return.
I love the picture. Grace for an elastic relationship. That is so beautiful. And I'm just kind of recapitulating the time that I had when I reached for Dad. That, man, it would have been horrible to give up on potential of what could have been, what is now. And I'm not gonna say it was easy either. I do believe there were many times that I wanted it more than Dad.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that could be a mark of a son too,
Mm-hmm.
natural and spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
that we can't give up on those that don't necessarily understand us. It took me a while to realize that Dad was hurt deeply. He sat right in the chair that you're sitting. In the episode that he and I did, that wasn't even then an episode. This just came as a conversation that probably more selfish, that I'd be able to go back and refer to and have a conversation with my father. But he sat there in that chair and talked about he was hurt. It was the worst hurt he could have experienced. And I felt that Dad was hurt because I know him, but I did not know how badly
Mm-hmm.
I had hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so glad I never gave up on what I'm seeing beauty come from today.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it for the generation, the father, mother generation, and son, daughter generation? I think I got the answer. I already know the answer. But how important is it for the third generation, for them to address the mess between the first two generations?
Any mess you don't address, you'll repeat. Anything that you're afraid to discuss, you're going to see its proliferation again and again. And so it's essential that we pull the cover off of all of those things and have good conversations about them. Our issue.
How do you talk to somebody that doesn't want to talk?
Oh, that's a really good question. So you start by creating story. Create story. Here's my life, right? David didn't want to talk to Nathan, but Nathan had a story. And when Nathan shared that story, David could do nothing else but deal with the issue that he wanted to cover. Sometimes you have to create story, create narrative around it. Talk through your own context. I want to talk to my great-grandfather. I want to talk to my grandfather. I want to talk to my father. And here's what's going on in my life. Oh, now they begin to open the doorways and the gateways when they begin to see the cracks of similarity. They begin to see the issues that we have likewise had to go through. And the other thing that I would say is two things. Don't give up and use your discernment. For some of us, we approach things at the wrong time. There are 14 chiastic, binary, polarized, paradoxical opposites in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. None of them can happen at the same time. So we'll have to be discerning enough to know when there's a time to build and a time to tear down, time to sow and a time to tear, a time to embrace and a time to cease from embracing, a time to be born and a time to die. We got to start looking at that window. Years ago, I preached a sermon called The Window of Opportunity. Just because I want to talk doesn't mean it's the best time to talk. You know what? I want to get this off my chest. That may not be a good time. And if you want to be efficacious and you want to be effective, you better start discerning, because some windows are this big, some windows are this big. And there are people who have gotten in windows this big and others had windows this big and couldn't get near them. Mm-hmm. My grandmother used to, my uncle used to say, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a beach ball. You weren't supposed to laugh.
But he's right.
It's true. It was true. And so I think that's the other part that's essential for us, and that is using your discernment. Sometimes it's just not the right time. Don't be discouraged. Learn to create spaces and opportunities. I'm going to build a relationship with you, even if it's not the right time to talk to you about what I want to talk about. I'm going to be present with you. I'm going to give you a right. We ride to the concert together. We're going to church together. We're going to eat together. And there may be a space in those multiple times that we're together. But if not, I'm not going to force it. I'm going to let it happen organically, and I'm going to discern, is this a good time? This is a good opportunity for me to lift it up. No matter how long it took for you and your dad to sit in this space, when you sat here, it was the right time. Yep. How do we know? Because you learned so much that you didn't know. And I loved that vulnerability you had a moment ago when you said, I just didn't know how bad he was hurt. That's vulnerability. Yeah. That's amazing. And to be able to say, I did what the Lord called me to do, but I missed something. I didn't know how bad he was hurting. I didn't know what he was going through.
It was a vulnerable moment for me to hear him say it. As I grew up, I started realizing and wondering, Dad's just hurt. But for him to say it, it took a whole lot.
And for him to say it, he is the veritable Jasper Williams. Don't nothing hurt him.
Nope.
Well, I remember my first time hearing him preach live. Somebody was, I guess he was arguing so good. And the guy on the organ was trying to hit him.
Didn't have good discernment.
Did not. And he said, didn't I tell you that last night? What, that last night? Get off the organ. I was sitting there, this little Pentecostal guy, just become a Baptist. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably not.
You missed the window, the broadside of a barn
with a beach ball.
Consider it to be missed. Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate this conversation. I hope others do as well. I got to ask you to go back one more thing. Go back and say what you just said about the 14 things in Ecclesiastes chapter 8. Because I don't know. You said it so fast. It was such eloquence. Say it again.
14 binary, polarized, chiastic, paradoxical opposites.
And on that note, welcome to, again, maybe I should say goodbye from another Legacy Conversation. Man, thank you for sharing your insights and your mind in this conversation.
Absolute I love you, bro. I love you too so much.